Welcome everyone to Train Tuesday. I am your host, Jim Wigan with Athearn. So glad to have you on board tonight. If you're watching us on the live stream, thank you. If you're catching us later on our YouTube channel, thank you once again. And if you like what you see, please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment. We try to answer all those comments that we can. And for those who are joining us live, I see that Mr. DG Model Works is in the house. Stephen Wagner is here. Delta 9, Tim O'Goule. Let's see, Randall, Wardell, Ronald, Rogan, and Jason, just to name a few, are joining us on board. We're going to be talking about Roundhouse tonight. We're going to be talking about Roundhouse F units. And no, this is not an April Fool's joke. We are going to be talking about some blue box era stuff, but it's been redefined for the 21st century, and that is the F7As. So let's do one more round of shout outs and get started with some more model train goodness. I see Glenn Power Williams has joined the chat. Ronald, Randall, Eduardo, Steve Johnson, JD Boyd, and Harry, just to name a few. We got about 78 joining us live right now. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me here on Train Tuesday. And like I said, we're going to be talking F units. We're going to be going back to F units, specifically F7As. And these models, a lot of you have been pretty excited about because it's a little bit old, it's a little bit new, it's a little bit borrowed. Definitely going to be something blue. These models harken back to the 1950s. In fact, under the original name of Globe, which is what Irv was calling them back then. And then once they got established, they got the Athearn banner, and they were popular within the blue box line for many, many, many years. Of course, they made many returns until recently. And we're going to be talking about some of those upgrades. So let's get started with Train Tuesday, and let's talk about these Roundhouse F7As. Now, some prototype information on the F7. It was a 1,500 horsepower diesel electric locomotive produced by EMD. It was produced from February 1949 until December of 1953. Now, many F7s remained in service for decades. In fact, the F7 really was one of those diesels that really brought the end to steam. Now, diesels were nothing new with Class 1 railroads at the time. They were used as switchers and in some cases even smaller branch lines. However, the heavy lifting still went to the steam locomotive. The number one thing that really sidelined the steam locomotive, however, was maintenance. Steam locomotives, especially large steam locomotives, were a maintenance nightmare, always taking on water and some type of fuel source, whether it be in the latter days coal or eventually oil. There was a lot of work to these locomotives, and keeping them up to spec was a full-time job. EMD brought about their F units, and while the early F units were extremely successful, the F7 would be one of the most successful locomotives in their catalog for many years. Now, Santa Fe was one of the biggest railroads to purchase the F7s. In fact, they're famous for their war bonnet scheme, as you can see here, but also other railroads such as Southern Pacific, Baltimore and Ohio, Pennsylvania, Chesapeake and Ohio, New York Central, and among many others also purchased the F7. Now, the F7s would last throughout the 50s, into the 60s, 70s, and in some cases, the 80s. In some cases, even here locally in Illinois, they were used right up until a few years ago on a short line. Now, these F units would see many changes as time would come. A lot of these, like by the Santa Fe, would end up being rebuilt as CF7s. Others would go on to tourists and excursions, and yet others would go on to museums. But regardless, the F7 is probably the iconic locomotive that most people, even those who are not familiar with railroading in general, probably can identify. Now, the classic F7A by Athearn, this has got a lush history all on its own. It's probably safe to say we've probably manufactured more HO scale F units, and they've probably seen more mileage than the actual prototype. Now, it was first offered as a plastic one-piece body way back in the 1950s, and the Athearn F7 has been the train set locomotive of choice for over a generation for model railroaders. I know I still have my dad's original Union Pacific F unit, and of course, I've got the one from when I was young as well. Now, this classic F7 has been retooled. It was one of those things where we wanted to make some refinements and bring it into the 21st century properly. So we'll talk about some of those things, but one of those things is the ability to put in a 21 pin decoder. There's some other refinements as far as the scale authenticity of the body and just some other things that we'll discuss in detail in a moment. But first, let's talk about what's coming right now. Now, let's talk a little bit about this photo. This photo means a lot to me. Not only was it taken by one of my favorite photographers, the James Boyd, but this was taken in 1966 in Chillicothe, Illinois, which is actually one of my hauntings for rail fanning when I'm in Illinois. A little bit has changed since that picture was taken. However, definitely familiar for anybody that has rail fanned the Transcon throughout Illinois, specifically if you are going westbound towards Galesburg, Illinois. So this, again, really cool picture. 38C is actually one that we're going to be offering in this run. Now, these are available at your hobby shop right now. I just got word that a lot of them are in stock. So if you pre-ordered these, we offered them about 2 years ago. You may already have yours now, or you may have gotten a phone call or an email from your dealer. If not, these are in stock, and if you really like these, you're going to want to go ahead and pick these up. First one out the gate, it goes without saying, probably the most iconic paint scheme ever to adorn an F unit was the Santa Fe War Bonnet. Now, it goes without saying, this is an earlier F unit from the 1950s. We're going to be offering this in 2 road numbers, 45L, as you see on your screen, and we're also going to offer 38C. Next is Southern Pacific. Of course, this is another highly requested paint scheme. The Black Widow paint scheme definitely lends itself well to the shape and style of the F unit. You know, going back into the early days of dieselization on Class 1 railroads, there was more marketing involved in paint schemes. And quite often those paint schemes were made to accentuate the lines of the locomotives. And certainly the previously mentioned Santa Fe and, of course, the Southern Pacific, as you see here, are no exceptions. Now, this one's going to be available in 2 road numbers as well. You see here we've got 62, 38, and we're also offering 62, 15. Continuing our journey out west, we've got the classic Union Pacific as it appeared in the mid to late 1950s. This is the same paint scheme that I have that my dad gave me when I was a kid. He had one of the original Athearn F units, and it came in this paint scheme. Not this road number, though. This road number 1482 is also going to be accompanied by 1473, so I have no problem doing an AA lash up. This is a really striking paint scheme, although looks rather simple compared to the other ones. Still a striking paint scheme, and it looks great on that EMD car body. All right, Canadian folks, here you go. Speaking of paint schemes that accentuate the lines and the look of a locomotive, the classic Canadian Pacific in the orange and maroon with the original Beaver logo looks absolutely stunning on this locomotive. The colors just match, and the way they're shaped throughout the body. This is just a great looking locomotive. One thing keen eye observers would need to look at is, if you notice carefully, the yellow stripe actually goes across the radiator grills on the side. That was something we couldn't do in the blue box era. The printing on these is way better than anything we had during the blue box era. Now, again, you've got 2 road numbers to choose from, or of course you might want to pick up both of them. Seen here is 1418. We've also got 1424 available. All right, fans of the Midwest, Milwaukee Road, another great paint scheme. Iconic paint scheme, and we're offering the Milwaukee Road for our fans of the Midwest into the West. Again, 1950s era, this is 118C. We'll also offer 109A. We never do New England roads. I keep hearing that all the time. Well, that's a fallacy. And to prove it, we've got Main Central into Pine Green. Now, an interesting thing about the Main Central, originally when Main Central got a lot of their E and F units, they were maroon, or engine maroon as the Boston and Maine called them. They shared the same identical paint scheme with the Boston and Maine, except they had a pine tree versus a Minuteman. Now, this paint scheme may look familiar, and that's not by accident. This paint scheme here was actually developed by EMD designers and was also applied on the nickel plate as well as the Denver and Rio Grande. Years later, the Main Central updated their paint scheme to this pine green, and it really looks good with the EMD Deluxe Gold and Pine Green. This was a paint scheme that would last until the GP38s arrived on the property in 1966 when they went to the Harvest Gold or Harvest Orange color. We're going to offer 2 road numbers with this as well. It's 681 that you see on your screen now, as well as 686. Another thing to note is check out the barricade stripes on the front pilot. That's something that we honestly didn't do with the blue box era back in the day. Again, the printing on these is exceptional, and the painting on these is exceptional as well. Something else we always hear at Athearn, we never do undecorated. Well, we've been dipping our toe in the water again for undecorated, and I am happy to say that we're offering not only this single headlight version of the F7A and undecorated, but we're also going to offer the dual headlight as well. Now, the horns aren't on there, but trust me, all of the parts that you need are included in the poly bag. That includes your clear windows, your horns, and other small details. Now, you'll notice that it is a pure undecorated unit. If you look at the side frames and the fuel tank, the chassis is undecorated. It's all undecorated. These are production photos of the actual units. So for all those out there that have been wanting to have blue box return or blue box undecorated, here is your chance. You can pick these up at your hobby shop, and you can even super detail these to your heart's delight, because if you look carefully, the molded on details that used to be on these models years ago are not there. Replaced are small dimples. All you need to do is some time and a number 80 drill bit and carefully drill where those dimples are and add the details of your choice. Now let's talk about what we did to improve these locomotives. So first of all, this is a new body tooling. It is based on the EMD F7A Phase 1 early. What does that mean? Well, that was the most common F7 used. This also has a revised frame with a heavy die-cast weight and now has provisions for a 21-pin DCC decoder. Now, I had a lot of folks ask me when I was at Amherst, can I put a sound unit in there? There's no provisions for that speaker. However, you've got a lot of room to work with in there. You can probably figure out how to put some type of speaker box in there with a sound decoder. It's super simple to put that in there. You simply spread the body like you would the traditional blue box, slowly take the body off, mind the wires for the headlight because those are attached, and take out the dummy plug, put in the 21-pin decoder of your choice, and you're ready to run. If you don't believe me, John Stackpole, our lead product developer, did this in real time at the Amherst show, and it probably took him maybe 2 minutes to do the whole thing. So real simple. The other thing that's been changed is there's a revised body to chassis mounting, and this simplifies disassembly and allows for easier kit bashing into a de-skirted version. Now, folks, remember me saying in the past, a lot of these F units that lasted into the 60s and beyond, in the early days, that streamlined skirting that you see by the fuel tank looks really cool. But if you're the maintenance guy that has to work on one of these things, that skirting is just for aesthetics only. It really gets in the way. So by the 1960s, a lot of railroads like the Rock Island simply removed that skirting or sections of the skirting. Well, for the first time ever, this has been designed so that you can take that skirting off and not lose the body. Because with the old blue box versions, once you cut that skirting off, you had to figure out another way to get that body mounted onto the chassis. There's a new rear coupler mounting box with 2 mounting locations for close coupling, or if you're got a tight radius, maybe you just have a little 4x8 layout with 18-inch radius curves. You can set it up for that too and not have any problems there. The other big deal with this is these now include flush fitting cab, porthole, and rear window glass. The original blue box did not. It was something you had to buy secondhand, or sorry, from a secondhand market. It was something that Athearn didn't offer. That comes standard now. The other thing that you're really going to enjoy about these is they have an improved all-wheel electrical pickup with 2 wires to each truck. This provides reliable current flow. If you've got a blue box, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of you guys in the comments right now probably have at least one of these in your collection, you know exactly how the electrical how it conducts itself. It's basically sprung metal. And while that's good, let's face it, the original blue box design is the Ford flathead of model railroading. They just work. They work great. But for today's standards and the things that we're doing with our model railroads, this is a little bit more practical. The difference is day and night, and it just makes operations that much easier. So there you have it. The ones that we're talking about that are on your screen, these are available at your hobby shop now. If you pre-ordered them, then you've probably either A, already had them, or B, you've probably been contacted by your dealer to let you know that they're here. If not, if you didn't pre-order one of these, you might want to call or email your Athearn dealer now and put in an order because they will go quickly. So with that being said, contact your Athearn dealer, whether it be online or if you're fortunate enough to have an actual brick and mortar that you can go and visit, you can go ahead and visit them and pick up one or more of these locomotives. It's a great economical version of a locomotive. If you don't need the whole Genesis treatment, you can definitely buy one of these. And if you're one of those guys that rather would detail and paint their own, then this is your chance to get your locomotive and design it the way you want it to be painted up. So there you have it. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I'm sure there's some questions out there on the F units or anything else that's brewing at Athearn. I'm pretty excited about these. Like I said, I still got my dad's. The dates from at least the early 60s. And the one that I picked up in the early 90s that I custom painted and detailed, and unfortunately doesn't look as nice as these, mainly because the detail parts. Eric wants to know, can the undeck be backdated to an F5? Yeah, so keen eye Main Central fans would know that that was technically an F5, not an F7. It's a stand-in model. If you look at an F5, it's basically a late model F3, if I remember correctly. There's a lot of spotting features that look very similar to an F7, and you can do with some work, you can probably do that. Okay. I do want to say one thing while I'm looking at comments. If you're just going to put in all caps, which is the equivalent to yelling, what Athearn should do in certain things, we're just not going to stand for that. That is the equivalent to yelling, and we don't really need that. We're here to talk about models. We're here to talk about specifically the F7As. If you've got an issue with the way Athearn's doing something, you can always email us, and that's a much better way of putting your grievances out there. And I've also seen some other questions that I'll have to address a little bit later. Jason, any updates on the GP40-2s due for early May? No, Janik shared some pictures with me, and I did put those on social media. And then we should be seeing those. Let's see, those are due in July. We should see production samples here in the next, where are we at now? We're on April. I'd say probably 8 weeks. So you should start seeing them on the website. Jim, what's your email? I got over 15 blue boxes. I'm super detailing. That's kind of cool. Also making a GP70B. Yes, you read that right. That you might want to look at. Well, that's interesting. You can always send stuff to the Athearn help at horizonhobby.com. And that goes to our service center. And then they will usually divvy those up where they need to go. Yeah, I used to super detail blue box too. There's nothing wrong with it. Here's the thing about that. We get a lot of complaints that, oh, we don't service the blue box market and that kind of thing. Well, let's consider something. We haven't made blue box in well over 20 years. So we don't have the parts support that we used to. There are some things that are in our catalog that are currently being produced that will work. But these F units that we just released, that we redesigned, that's kind of our love letter to the blue box era. This is still an economical locomotive, but it does bring it into the 21st century by allowing you to put a 21-pin DCC decoder if you wish. If you don't want to, you can just run it standard DC. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. And we've also made it easier for you to detail. Somebody noted earlier in the program that we removed the steam generator. I have a scar on my left hand that thanks John for taking that steam generator off, because before that, the blue box ones had the steam generator on, and that chisel, yeah, that did a job on my hand 30 years ago. So you don't have to worry about that. Good evening, Jim. Has anyone voiced an interest in a release of the Roundhouse F7 in the gray Milwaukee lightning bolt scheme? No, but it's probably just a matter of time before we do. Again, if you see something or you don't see something that you'd like produced, you can always go to our email address, Athearn product suggestions at athearn.com, and put in there what you want to see. We're always looking at that and looking to see what we can produce next. Anthony, great question. Is there any detail kits available for these engines? Yes, there is. Ironically, a competitor, because at one time this competitor carried these products back in the old days, back when they were blue box. But the same kits that I applied to my blue box are still available. You won't need the windows that are included with it, but you can use the grab irons. You can do a quick search for Athearn F7 detail kit, and it should turn up. Also, there are other companies out there that offer other details that you can add to these models depending on what locomotive you're trying to replicate. Let's see what else we've got here. I'm going to go back. Randall, I would agree with that. I just looked up photos for the Frisco's F7As and the company's final colors. Chevy engine block red and white, and that would make a cool addition for a future run. Sure. Or if you really wanted to be bold, you could do the abomination of the Illinois Central Gulf, orange and white F unit. A lot of guys from both the GM&O and IC don't like those, but it's kind of a different paint scheme. Charles is saying thank you for the Santa Fe and the SP. They look great. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to go back a little bit while I was talking and seeing if there's any questions on anything else. If I have not seen it yet, I'm still going to address it. So one of the questions I got at Amherst was, can I take my old blue box F unit body and put it on the new chassis? Yes, you can. However, and there's a big however, this is where the modeler comes out. The chassis has been redesigned. And not only has the chassis been redesigned, but the body has been redesigned. Now, the body is a lot more accurate. The shape of the front nose of the F unit has been changed dramatically to look more like the original EMD product. The way it is right now, you're going to have to do some filing of the front of the frame for you to get that on there. Likewise, though, however, let's say you've got something like a locomotive that somebody gave you that you really like, but the body is broken. Maybe it survived our childhood somehow. So a lot of the parts are broken off and it's really looking ratty, but the locomotive runs fine. Can you put the new Roundhouse F unit body on the old chassis? Yeah, there's no modifications needed. It just goes right on there. So that was a question that I got at Amherst quite a bit, actually. These have LED lights, no more incandescents. How sound friendly are they? Well, you've got a lot of room in there. So with today's speaker technology, you've got a lot of room. Even though it's got additional weight in there, it's really wouldn't be that hard for the average modeler to add that. Couple of questions asking if we're going to switch to Katie. Unfortunately, right now, that is not something that we're going to do. We're going to keep offering the McHenrys because that is one of our companies. However, we haven't talked about it in a while, but product development has been working on a metal coupler that we're hoping at some point to release. I'm going back further just to see if there are any questions. Earlier, it looks like a lot of folks are just reminiscing, and that is a great thing. There's a lot of reminiscing going on because these are iconic. F units themselves are iconic, and of course, the blue box F unit was iconic as well. Tim, you wanted to see if there was a BN executive scheme? We've already released those, actually. I think we released those in the previous run, so check those out. So, Christopher, technically, yes, you could take the old Globe F7 body and put it on the new chassis, but you're going to have to modify the new chassis because remember, the old chassis was kind of beveled on either side so that the body from the Globe could fit on there. In order for you to get that on there, you're going to have to do some filing on the mechanism, and I would take that mechanism apart. I wouldn't be filing that with a motor and everything on there. But technically, yeah, with some modeling, you could do that. Let's see. These are white LEDs with a blue. Now remember, in DCC, if you're using these as with a DCC decoder, you can definitely change the intensity on these. So keep that in mind. Let's see. DG Model Works says my first train set was an F7. I bet you a lot of people had that. Mine was a GP18, but a lot of my friends had F7s or some type of F unit. Darby, this is a great question. We did send out an announcement yesterday on our social media post. He says, sorry, I'm late, Jim. When is the website going to be updated with new announcements? That is actually going to be this Friday the 4th. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, there's been a lot going on in the world, and there's been some updates. There's the tariffs that are going on. We had to implement some price changes, and one of the things that slowed things down because of the price changes is when we announce. We would have normally announced this past Friday, but because of everything that was going on and because there were so many layers involved with it, it's going to be this Friday. So pay attention this Friday on the website. You'll see that as well. In fact, I'll be shooting videos for new announcements starting tomorrow. What else do we have here? Tony Cook. If you don't know Tony Cook, you have been living under a rock. Tony Cook is the editor of Model Railroad News, as well as some other fine publications. Check out his magazine, monthly magazine, if you want to keep up to date on everything that is model railroading. Tony wants to know, are the new Streamliner cars matching many of the F-unit schemes out yet? We just photographed those a couple of weeks ago, so they should be delivering quite soon. In fact, those BN executive scheme, those are going out there. The Amtrak coaches are another one that should be heading out there. I'm trying to think. I think UP and the Pan Am ones are also involved in that. We wanted to actually show them at the Amherst show, and we missed it by that much, as Maxwell Smart would say. They actually came in after Amherst for photography. So they'll be here soon. One thing I do want to point out, what Tony is talking about is our old Athearn, and again, these were blue box, Athearn Streamline passenger cars. Now, we've had those in our lineup for almost as many years as the F units. Now, in the past, those passenger cars had Talgo coupler mounted trucks. That means the truck had a long, spindly piece off from it with a coupler on it, so you could negotiate 18-inch radius curves. We did away with that. The new Streamliners, as of this first release, they've been redesigned. They have body-mounted couplers. So the trucks now are completely separate from the couplers, but don't worry. Even if you have an 18-inch radius, you can still navigate it easily because the way they've been designed, they have a swing spring system to them, even though they're body-mounted. If you get our Athearn newsletter, I talk about it a couple of weeks ago, about how they were redesigned, and they'll still work, but they look so much better. Stephen is tugging at my memory, saying Boston and Maine used many EMDF units on its north-south Connecticut line. After newer loco types took over many others routes, I used to see them in Greenfield, Mass. I used to see them in Pennacook, New Hampshire. In fact, that's what got me into model railroading, was watching these. And the Boston and Maine, ever the kind of the Rock Island of the Northeast, I have distinct memories of faded maroon Alco RS3s with Boston and Maine F7Bs and blue dip, followed by either a GP7 or a GP9 going up the northern as it trundled by in Pennacook and Bosquen. So yeah, Boston and Maine, they kept those F units right up until pretty much the Guilford era. Let's see what else we've got here in the comments. Let's see what we've got here. Looking for questions on the F units. Ian Green, 1970, says, I generally go with Genesis when I can, but these have great potential for Fremo. Do these have the same drivetrain as Athearn Ready to Roll, or is it something else? So if you were to pop the shell out from these, they look real familiar. It looks a lot like the original blue box. The chassis looks a lot like the blue box, but it has been upgraded. Now the motor is different, but the location is about the same. There are some subtle differences there. The biggest difference that you're going to notice is the fact that you can put in the decoder. You're going to have that motherboard with a 16 pin that you can put the decoder in. You're also going to notice there's LED lights instead of the old incandescent. And you're also going to notice wires for the pickups on all 8 wheels versus that sprung metal that we had in the old days. Other than that, it looks very similar. You know, to use a car analogy, a straight 6300 that was produced by Ford in 1966 looks an awful lot like the one that's in my 1996 F-150. They look similar. They're based on the same thing, but there's been some refinements done, such as fuel injection and electronic EFI type stuff versus carbureted and that kind of thing. So very similar, but refined. And you've got a good point there too. With a little bit of work on these, especially now since they look that much better and they've been updated to look more like an actual F unit. A little bit of work. Yeah, these are perfect for Fremo. If you're into doing super detailing, I suggest to get the undecorated of your choice and stock up on some good decals and paint and some detail parts. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of the talented modelers that are watching this right now could fool a lot of us into thinking they've got a Genesis unit when in actuality it is a super detailed Roundhouse F7. Seeing a lot of guys asking for stuff. Remember our email address. It is Athearn Product Suggestions, Athearn Product Suggestions at athearn.com. So this is something that we're going to talk about because you saw what went on in the email last week. You saw what went on social media. Saw a lot of conspiracy theories out there. Apparently, me and John drive Maseratis, whatever. So let's try to bring this into perspective. As you know, the current administration has put tariffs as of April 2nd on anything that is coming in from mainline China. Now, it's no shock to anybody that has been purchasing Athearn or a lot of manufacturers' model railroad products that these are made in China. Now, because of this administration, that was their decision. We don't have any say in that decision. That was something that that administration campaigned on. And without getting too political, that administration is what is running this country right now. Horizon has to follow those mandates because if we don't, well, yeah, it's a federal government thing. So a lot of people are asking, does this really affect Athearn? Well, there are things that are already in the warehouse now or the distribution center that you're saying, well, didn't that come before the tariffs actually came into power? There's a lot of back dates that you're not hearing about. So there are things that have been impacted that go back further. Other questions and comments I see are, what about something I pre-ordered in 2022? Surely those are not affected by the tariffs. Unfortunately, they are, because until they're actually produced and then shipped and enter the United States, that's when the tariffs take place. So unfortunately, that is what we're left with. Now, I've also had a lot of folks asking, well, why can't you make these in America again? I would have to do an episode on just that topic alone. But I can tell you this much. What we were producing in America versus what we're producing now are day and night differences. Even just the simple little roundhouse model that we talked about tonight, there are so many differences. That is a topic for another episode. Maybe if we get enough comments in this, maybe we can talk about it more in depth later. But keep in mind that produce model railroad equipment, they were literally built for this industry. They never existed in America. So it's rather simplistic to just say, hey, Horizon, bring all the manufacturing back to the United States. There's a lot of math that needs to be done there. There's a lot of explanations. There's a lot of work, and it's much broader than this episode. But right now, this is the way it's going to be. And we're leaving things open. Maybe the tariffs will go away. I don't know. I don't want to get into politics on this, but I do want you to know that Friday you will see some of the reflection of the prices. One thing I do want to let you know, though, is we tried to even that all out. We didn't want to just gouge you a 20% tariff, but basically across the board, we tried to stay at 10%. And so, yeah, comfortable situation to talk about? No, it's not, but it is something that does need to be said. And we're sorry that angered a lot of you, but we are under the constraints of the government, and this is what we're doing. So hopefully, maybe down the road, maybe those tariffs will go away. If it does, we have the ability to reflect that in our pricing. Let's see. Michael Smith wants to know any dummy B units plan to go with the F units. So in the modern world, dummies don't sell. Dummies, if you don't know, are locomotives that have everything but the drivetrain, the motor and electrical pickups. The reason why you don't see it much anymore is most people, and we can see this from our latest survey, are DCC running their layout with DCC. And just like real railroads, it's better to have powered units. So having a double header or more units in a consist with DCC is easier than it was in the old days. It just, you couldn't really easily speed match DC locomotives. And also the manufacturing, believe it or not. It's just not worth it for us to offer B units anymore that are unpowered. Same goes with the A units. We used to sell dummy A units. So that answers that. As far as the B units, we didn't do any updates on the B units, but we will be selling those. In fact, we did. Our last release included both A and B units. Let's see what else we've got for questions here. Randall, I will agree wholeheartedly on what you said about your F-150. Andrew says, what happens with these tariffs will change the hobby's future. It may, you know, we don't know. This is uncharted waters for not just us, but other manufacturers too. Other manufacturers have made similar statements. We don't know what's going to happen, but we are doing our best at Athearn to maintain the roads that you want and the quality that you want. And, you know, if we need to change some things in our lineups, we may have to do that. Let's see what other questions we have. Jason says the undeck F7s will be great for us freelance layouts, and I would be happy to custom paint an F7 as AM Road since 4070 is an F7A. How many people know what he's referring to? AM Road. I'm probably dating myself there, but it was a Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor movie. This is a good question, and I honestly don't know. But Icon Sees Mr. No says, hey, Jim, is there a good diaphragm kit that will work with the new F7? Also, what are the coupler pockets like? I like to run Sargent couplers. Yeesh. I know I've converted mine to 158 Katie's. I have not played with the Sargents. But the coupler boxes are pretty much designed for, like, if you want to swap them out for Katie's, you can. But as far as the Sargent, I don't honestly know. The other one, too, is there a good diaphragm kit that will work? There probably is. There's a couple of different manufacturers out there. You can do a Google search. And if you've used them on, say, a Genesis locomotive in the past, you should have a pretty good success with these as well. I can tell you just by looking at the blue box version of the F unit that I have and the new version looks so much better than the old one. So that may help too. Let's see. Yes, somebody got it right. Terry got it. Silver Streak. Great movie. If you have not seen Silver Streak, you owe it to yourself to watch it. It's a good movie. I wish we could do the whole Silver Streak train, but you know what? Licensing. We've talked about licensing in the past. Jason, I got to tell you something. So the Athearn website, we updated a couple of years ago. And for the last 2 years, I have been getting feedback from you guys at shows through surveys and everything else. And that is under control of Horizon. There's nobody from Athearn that actually operates that website. I've been trying to get things to change because I know there's some problems with it. Now, the ETA thing, I can tell you, since the software integration going on 2 years ago, I am starting to see some inroads in there. I have started to see some dates that are starting to make sense. I don't have control over that. My boss doesn't have control over that. The biggest thing is we're trying like crazy to get Horizon Corporate's website crew to update some of the things that we've asked for that we've gotten in turn from you. I hate to keep asking for your patience. Right now, that's the only thing I can do. The other thing that I can do for you, Jason, is if you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, I try to put in a weekly format updates on when things are coming into stock, when you can expect them, because I'm sure, Jason, like me, you have a budget. Also, you can also ask on social media. There's a couple of us on the Athearn team that watch the social media, and I have no problem answering a question if you want to know when the GP40s are coming out or any other locomotive. We are trying to work closely with the factory and trying to give you some good dates. So probably not the answer you were looking for, but let's be honest and transparent. This is something I wish Athearn had more control over. Let's see what else we got. Terry, good question. We get this from occasionally. Is there a chance to make a painted unlettered locomotive to make it a what if railroad, say Savannah and Atlanta, but to make Southern like my photo of the first run of your SD70As? We've kind of experimented with that. We did some GP7Us that were former Santa Fe, slightly weathered, and it's perfect if you want to have a short line. There used to be a short line here not too far from me called Decatur Junction, and they had former Santa Fe locomotives. So they were painted up in the blue and yellow, but they had their own logos on them. And so we're experimenting with that. If you'd like to see more like that, please let us know in the Athearn-product suggestions email. And if we get enough requests for it, we'll do it. Sid wants to know any hints on products announced on Friday. Yeah, I'll give you a hint. I got to think of a good one now. Well, I mean, as far as roads, you're going to have a lot of different roads to choose from. Burlington Northern 90 fans, if you're a Burlington Northern fan of the 1990s, rejoice. There's something coming for you. We've been hearing you guys asking for BN 1990s stuff. Oh, I know. The Genesis locomotives that we're going to be offering in this run have recently been updated. So there's going to be new lighting features, which means you're going to have lighted number boards and classification lights. So that's a big deal. These are being offered on models they have not had before. So there's a couple of different sneak peeks for you. Glenn, this is another good question. What about lettered locomotives but unnumbered so that people can have different numbers? So what he's talking about is, hey, BN Cascade Green locomotives as delivered, do 3 numbers and then do one that's just blank. It already says Burlington Northern. It's already painted in the appropriate colors, but it's unnumbered. And it's something we're actually thinking about doing. We're probably going to stick with that with the Athearn line. But yeah, let us know in the comments if that's something you want to see. If that is something that we see more requests for, it's something that we're certainly going to do, at least experiment, just like the undecorated. Now, I can be honest with you, the undecorated locomotives haven't sold as well as we were hoping. So if you really like these undecorated F7s, I encourage you to go out there and get them now and start working on them. Kind of late for winter projects, I get that, but hey, you know what? Summer's coming. Depending on where you're at, if you need to cool off, you've got something to work on. Let's see what's going on else down here. Scott Maxwell, good question. Is there a market for short line railway locomotives? That's a good question, and it's one of those things where it just depends. Some short lines have some kind of notoriety and they get popular, whether it be their paint scheme or the particular prototype that they have. Other short lines, not so much. We've offered some short lines in the past from all over the United States, Canada, and some do really well and some don't do so well. Why is that? Now, that can change. We've also seen that with former Class 1s. There are times when Conrail is really hot, and there's times when Conrail's not hot. So it can be somewhat cyclical. but that does not mean you don't have to not use our Athearn product suggestion email. So if there's a short line that you'd like to see, chances are maybe there's some other guys that want to see that same short line and we can offer it in the future. Shoot us an email at athearn-product-suggestions@athearn.com. One or two more questions, and I'm going to let you guys get back to some modeling. I know winter's still here for most of the upper Midwest. It's still not warm enough for me to do anything outside. Let's see what else we've got. Rogan, interesting. We actually did this. What if you guys just did the drive mechanisms for the locomotives? The SD40 tunnel motor, both sound and DCC ready, were popular. We actually tried that. And I do believe, I'm just going by sheer memory. It was the SD40. It might have been just the straight 40s. I don't remember if it was the tunnels or not. But we did offer just the drivetrains. Unfortunately, they did not sell well. So I don't know if we'll do that again. Let's see. GLC, that's a good question for our Athearn product suggestion email. So go ahead and shoot us your Ann Arbor suggestion through our email. And yep, you did do the tunnel motor chassis. Thank you, Terry, for confirming my memory. Michael says exactly what I'm thinking. I don't think spring is ever coming. It's got more work on the layout. That's how I look at it. This coming weekend, I'm going to be working on both my HO and my N-scale layout. One thing I do want to bring up too, before I let you guys go for the evening, keep in mind everything that I do on Train Tuesday, it's pretty much just me. I don't have a production crew. I don't have a $1 billion budget. This is pretty much what you see is what you get. This all started back in 2020 during the beginnings of the pandemic by Matt Gentry and Janik, and it's grown to this. And I want to thank you for making it grow. But in the next few weeks, I'm hoping that we've got some new camera equipment. I've invested some money into some lighting, and I'm also investing in moving things around a little bit in the studio so we have both an HO layout as well as an N-scale layout for you to see the newest things. I do want to thank you for your support, and I do want to thank you for the comments. That is one thing that really feeds our Athearn product development team. Our Athearn product development team is made up of model railroaders, both HO and N-scale. And when they see how happy you are with the products, it just drives them to do even more. So I want to thank you for your support. One more question, then I'm going to let you guys get back to it. We will end with Mr. Brian Bates. I haven't seen Brian in a bit. He says, you're not coming to Denver. Yeah, unfortunately, we are not going to make it to Denver. Not this year. Hopefully next year we'll be back. But unfortunately, Athearn will not be at Denver this year. So with that being said, I want everybody out there to be happy, be healthy, be safe, do some good modeling, because it seems like spring is kind of on its own holiday and certainly not here. But I want you to contact your dealer if you're interested about these Athearn F7s. They are in stock right now. And those passenger cars are, I believe, also in stock. So check those out at your Athearn dealer. Until next Tuesday or next time, be happy, be healthy, be safe, and do some modeling. And above all, high greens. Good night, everyone.